Hello, Lisa here. If you go to sleep at night and you feel like you've done something, more than likely you have. We consider this that you work for the army of the Lord or you're working for the army of the bad guys. I guess either way I'm speaking to you, I'd rather talk to good guys. These theorems are based on Dolores Cannon's work, reading the Bible, and my own personal experience. Now, this I'm out here on this channel. I've been stalked, gang stalked, targeted for a very long time. And I don't think it was targeting for a governmental reasons. I hear other people talk about targeting, and I'm not so sure it's the government that's involved in that. Okay, that's the way I feel about it. I know I've been on a list since I was a little girl because you get kind of followed around when you have a high IQ. And I'm grateful for that because in the long run, when the story comes out, maybe a lot of gang stalking will actually stop. Now, I'm being cyber stalked in a peculiar way. And they, 69 years old, so they're like, want to play it off as dementia. But if you were to talk to my doctor of today, he'd say she's not demented. No. I forget things and I have stuff I do that maybe I shouldn't. My liberties in Christ, as I will say, is that I actually drink a beer from time to time and I smoke some weed. But Spirit says it's the smoking of the weed that has prevented me from being super damaged by witchcraft and warlockery. And this is what they want me to bring up to you today. There are a group of people who have been given money from governments to experiment on this mental process that Obama started with energy weapons. Hence, this is Thorsday, and we are going to talk about this. It's out so late because I've had a horrendous day being gang stalked on the internet. I'm not going to tell you all the details because it's boring. Money. They keep chiseling me for $57, $53, $93 here and there off of my bank accounts. Now, if I have to close this debit card, it's 4 bank accounts, 4 IE3 reports, and I'm out here so acronyms can know I'm being fucked with. Yesterday, which I lost the day, was all about Gemini on my phone, which I disabled, and I couldn't do an effing thing on my phone without Gemini interfering and popping up. What these people are doing with government programs, your taxpayer dollars, people, and Spirit has told me I have to be trigger warning, it's graphic, but this is what these people do. They are playing with the Haarp to make sexual energy weapons. And people, please be advised, and you can look up in your government stats or call your senator. Our government has dust cameras, okay? Somebody could come in here and just put dust. And then they got cameras into you taking your clothes off, taking your shower. And they put you up on cctv cameras and make money off of you. There's some big name people's doing this. And I find out Victor Radcliffe's one of them, along with the guy I call Martin Brusque. Now, all you insiders will know who that means. But here's what they do, and some of you big wig ladies need to know this with your very high-profile husbands. If you ever wake up in the middle of the night and feel a cold sensation down on your vagina, because here's what it is. Sexual unions with a couple who are ordained, they love each other. They don't look around. They know that union is precious, right? What God puts together, don't pull asunder. Well, warlocks can't attach in there when you're in a deep union. But this cool hand Ray Luke shit that Martin Brusque likes to do will open up that vagina so another man can get in there while you're having sex and pull your energy for them because they're energy vampires. Now, I know this sounds like science fiction, people, but this is real. And the other thing they can do is they can make you writhe in the bed and feel sexually very crazy, which maybe your husband likes. You know, it'd be great if it's with your husband, but if you're in the bed and you feel that stuff, you're being attacked by energy weapons. Okay, so be advised. So, ladies, if you wake up at 2, 3 in the morning, because this is when they like to do this stuff, or right when you lay down, and trust me, they can tell when you're with somebody and when you're alone because they have these panels of electronics that read your brain and all your body dynamics. You know that thing you wear on the phone that'll tell you stuff? They have stuff like that, but it's on big monitors. So they watch your whole system. They can kind of read what you're thinking. I don't know how that comes off or if your actual thoughts come up as words on the screen. They know what you're thinking, and when you lay down to relax, if you feel like somebody's playing with you in your female parts, they are, okay? And it's not your husband. Unless your husband is rich enough to pay for this stuff and you know it and he's having a good time with you up there. You know, I don't know what you bigwigs are into, but I'm not into being played with by strangers, okay? So with that being said, I've had a horrendous day. That's why this is late. It's Thursday, so we're going to talk about the harp. Now, I didn't feel like putting the wig on, so I'm going to put this up there so y'all don't have to look at me because, man, I hear about it, how she's so ugly. And that's what they do in case you are a enlightened individual, self-actualizing. They attack those people. Because you can come up with ideas and be bright about things. And if you have, you know, you exercise and you have a career and everything, all of a sudden you go home and you have those terrible thoughts about yourself, it's them. And so I joined church because really covens are nothing but churches, people they sit in front of bowls, they wear odd costumes, they snort and do drugs, and they focus on making you feel bad about yourself. So I went to church and I have Pastor Amy praying for me because I've been praying. And quite frankly, to all you bad guys last night, I asked Jesus to cover you with his blood. And we'll see what happens now. Because, you know, I believe in the Lord Jesus. Anyway, I don't have a church as big as some of your fucking covens. But by fucking God damn it. And ladies from church, if you watch this, I can't work around children because I'll use the F word. I'm a crazy woman. I'm crazy in my own right that I'm a freaking artist. For Christ's sake. I can't wait to do a soliloquy. I wrote 2 of them, so which one did Catherine steal? And I name names because, and there's my conclusive evidence, nobody's come and said a word to me, and I name names. Okay? So, I'm just going to put this up so you don't have to look at me. This is the book we're reading. We're on chapter 5. Okay. Yeah. And I got one more thing to say about that L that I thought was so cool that she sent to me. I'm a little aggravated now that I know the reality of it. See, I meditate and I pray, and God shows and tells me things. Okay, chapter 5, High on the Sky. Countless suns and other galaxies spray cosmic rays in all directions continuously. Closer to home, our own sun radiates gamma rays, X-rays, and shorter wavelengths of ultraviolet light. When they hit the outer layers of Earth's atmosphere, these cosmic rays are absorbed by atoms. But in the process, electrons are knocked off the atoms. Thus, there is a constant flow of electrons at this altitude, and the atoms are changed to positively charged ions. This process gave the ionosphere its name, although ionization happens at heights as high above the Earth as 1,000 kilometers and as low as 50. The positively charged ions and negative electrons are most dense at altitudes of 80 to 400 kilometers. In non-metric terms, the ionosphere begins at an altitude of about 30 miles and goes up to about 300 or more. Forgive me, I had to have a sip. The natural electrically charged shield around the Earth filters harmful wavelengths of solar radiation, protecting the surface of Earth from significant bombardment. And there's a reference, Christopherson Geosystems, Macmillan, New York, 1992. Blown towards Earth on the solar wind, electrically charged particles follow Earth's magnetic field lines. Along such paths of least resistance, high energy particles funnel towards the magnetic poles of Earth, squeeze into a poleward current called the electrojet, and are dumped toward the Earth. Sometimes the electrojet dwindles, but at other times a solar flare floods the system with high energy particles, and the sky lights up into the dancing, shifting curtains of an auroral display. At the South Pole, it is called Aurora Australis, and the Northern Lights is Aurora Borealis. For eons, the electrojet has flowed in the form of a direct current into the polar regions of Earth. Who would want to change the electrojet? The path to a Giga project. In a way, it began with a few puzzled radio listeners. In 1933, a man in Eindhoven, Holland, tried to listen to a radio station in Barrow-Munster, Switzerland. Suddenly, he was hearing two stations. The Paro Radio Luxembourg was not supposed to be in tune at this frequency. It broadcast at a frequency far apart on the dial, but here it was superimposed on the Swiss station. The Luxembourg effect, as it was later called, did not remain a mystery long. The Dutch scientist named Tilligen figured out that the cross-modulation of the radio signals was a wave interaction caused by nonlinear characteristics of the ionosphere. And that piece of information comes to Ray J. Lunnan Jr. and Anthony J. Ferraro, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, Pennsylvania State in-house publication. What this means to non-scientists is that reactions of the ionosphere are unpredictable. Then other scientists also realized that high-power radio waves change the temperature and density of electrons in the ionosphere, and that other radio signals passing through the modified region were influenced. They experimented with wave interaction for 30 years and eventually were certain that directing high-power waves into ionosphere produced instabilities. Now, the Spirit's talking to me here. Let me see. Do you really want me to say that? To those of you who are quantumly entangled with me, when I say burn, that's where that comes from, okay? Oh gosh. Modified region was influenced. They experimented with wave interreaction for 30 years and eventually were certain that directing high power waves into the ionosphere produced instabilities. Their tool was a transmitter, array of antennae, called an ionospheric heater. Press releases now refer to it as ionospheric research instrument, but this book will call it a heater. A heater. They say that twice. For the most part, ionospheric heaters were operated by universities and research institutes. Stanford Research Institute, SRI, International, developed much of a high-frequency transmitting programs with money from the Defense Nuclear Agency. There's a reference here. National Telecommunications and Information Administration Memo, NTIA, Preliminary Assessment of Air Force Ionospheric Research Instrument, October 1, 1993. The newest multi-purpose tool being built for Haarp, however, is directed from Phillips Air Force Base. Penn State pioneered heaters. Anthony Ferraro, PhD, is a professor of electrical engineering at Penn State University, a school that was a pioneer in experimenting with this knowledge. In 1966, electrical engineers built a 500 kilowatt ionospheric heater at a site near the campus with an effective radiated power of 14 megawatts. Ferraro developed a technique of beaming power with two transmitters at the same time. As a way of probing, a high-power transmitter would heat a region of the lowest ionosphere, while a weaker transmitter was pulsing. Thus, the experimenters could study the wave interaction. Now, there's a reference here. Interview with John D. Matthews, Electric Engineering Department, Penn State. Penn State has been paid to do ionospheric modification research continuously for 30 years. Although they had a heater before Alaska or Norway, the university had to give up operating theirs after the neighbors complained. Firefighters in northeastern Canada, for example, had high-frequency radios on board their airplanes. Although Penn State's ionospheric heater was not on the same frequency, it was so strong that the airplane radios would kind of blank out, recalls Ferraro. We developed cooperative techniques. We would shut down whenever they wanted us to, but it became so difficult that we just had to give up. Heaters went to remote areas like Puerto Rico. Oh, whoa. 55, there's a reference. Jean Ann Manning's May 1995 interview with Tony Ferraro. They went to Puerto Rico. Oh, no wonder Puerto Rico wants America out of there. Okay. The initial idea was not connected with my work, was to create an artificial northern lights, Tony Ferraro said. There was not sufficient power to do that. Why make an artificial aurora borealis was the question. He replied that the plasma physicists wanted to control the northern lights to learn more about the physics which created them. Ferraro instead came in and used the facility to modulate the electrojet. These currents can be modulated by high-power transmitters so that they could be made to act as little antennas. Ferraro explained that in their natural state, The ionospheric currents are direct current, DC, as is the electricity from a battery. By modulating the atmospheric region, these high power transmitters, we can convert the electrojet current, in parentheses, in a small volume into alternating currents. Alternating currents flowing in a wire is an antenna. Now, these are not flowing in wires, they're flowing in space, but it's the same principle. We can create a little antenna. And I'm going to say once again, when I say burn, the experimenters wanted to generate very low frequencies and extremely low frequency electromagnetic waves from the antenna in the upper sky because VLF and ELF waves can travel almost around the world with very little loss. They generated the waves, but not strong enough to be of practical interest. That led to the Navy and the Air Force funding an even larger ionospheric modifier, Haarp. Haarp is not only meant for generating the low frequencies that would occur with a strong electrojet, Ferraro said, it has a wide, diverse utilization. Excuse me a minute. The operators sitting at Haarp's instrument control monitoring console indeed have a versatile tool at their fingertips. Okay, I just have to interject. Could you imagine people, some Dungeon and Dragon playing miscreants who do nitrous oxide balloons, snort cocaines, have sex, and then, human traffic teenagers and do horrific things to them? Would you like it if those people were sitting at those consoles? Just a thought. And then they have so much money, they can create gang stalking crews. Oh, boy. Then the operators can whip the narrow beam of radio frequency energy around in the sky at will. An article from a Penn State publication says array control permits slewing the beam to arbitrary locations within the overhead 30-degree cone within 10 microseconds. Visual display tells the operators how the experiment is progressing, and local and remote sensors, incoherent scatter radar, ryometers, and ion sounders, and other esoteric sounding apparatus monitor the ionosphere. The Penn State publication article adds that after the major parts of Haarp are evaluated in the field, a comprehensive series of tests will be completed as a demonstration of the IRI, Ionospheric Research Instrument, capability to the user community. The goals of Haarp are ambitious. Nevertheless, state-of-the-art capability will allow us to realize this powerful scientific research instrument which will probe the Alaskan sky. Long before Haarp was conceived, the former Soviet Union built more powerful 1 gigawatt Zelenogradskaya near Moscow, heaters the West, and recently Max Planck Institute in Germany, I don't know if I'm saying that right, so forgive me, built a heater at Tromsø, Norway in 1991. The Europeans caught up to the Russians by beaming 1 gigawatt of effective radiated power from Tromsø. The language in some documents hint that an element of mine is bigger than yours competition goaded the Americans to build a facility that would be 3 times more powerful than anything the Russians or the Germans have. Here we must make it clear that an ionospheric heater isn't judged by height. It may look like a 5 or 10 acre field of 50-foot high crosses, technically called dipoles, in a square arrangement. The larger the area covered by antenna, the more powerful. Although they are without an ionospheric heater, Penn State still has a respectable sized department involved in ionospheric modification. About 10 faculty and maybe 20 grad students, formerly called the Ionospheric Research Lab. It has become communications and space sciences. It used to be very large and very interdisciplinary, with math, chemistry, and physics people in it. Now it's primarily electrical engineering, Ferraro said. John D. Matthews is a physicist who finds himself in the electrical engineering department at Penn State because of consolidation of departments. His specialty area of the ionosphere down at the 100-kilometer altitude, during a phone interview, he noted that the main radar for high-frequency ionospheric heating experiments at Arecibo, Puerto Rico, can significantly heat the lower ionosphere as well as the upper. The heating is a result of high-powered diagnostic instruments. Arecibo is currently getting a major upgrade. Most of the heating is done at around 200 kilometers altitude, called lower F region of the ionosphere, because it is easier to heat that higher region to the maximum. Penn State got in on the ground floor with Haarp in 1991. Several departments at the university, the applied research laboratory, computer engineering, and engineering electronic design services, combined resources to go after a desirable contract. They were among the winners: Penn State, APTI, and Raytheon Corporation were each given contracts to study how to design the Haarp facility. Afterward, APTI invited Penn State to join it, along with SRI International and Athena Incorporated, an Alaskan corporation. As a team, the Office of Naval Research chose their team to build and demonstrate the powerful ionospheric heater near Gacona, Alaska. The capability will be further expanded to its final world-class performance capability in 1956. And there's a reference here. Ray J. Lunnan, Jr. and Anthony J. Ferraro, High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, Pennsylvania State, in-house publication. The only way there could be amplification of electromagnetic waves once they reach the ionosphere, in his opinion, would be with a special experiment using 2 transmitters beaming onto the same spot. The interactions of the radio waves can cause amplifications, said Kustov. Such highly energetic reactions can even create so-called gravity waves, he said. That is getting into an area of advanced science which is beyond the scope of this book. Gravity waves, people. I'm going to repeat it. Gravity waves. I'm going to say this, and I'm only going to say it once. There is scientific evidence that gravity is what affects autistic people. Okay. A history of mad science. Beckich's home state of Alaska has met ambitious scientists in the past. One may have had more academic credentials, clout, and charm than common sense. Oh, aren't we into that? Clout and charm rather than common sense. I'm sorry, gang stalkers, clout and charm, using electronic weapons. Dr. Edward Teller, known as the father of the H-bomb, traveled to Alaska in 1958 with a proposal to blast a chunk of that state's coastline off the map. As spokesman for the nuclear establishment, he wanted to prove that nuclear explosions were a tool for geographical engineering. Teller was widely quoted as telling Alaskans, "If your mountain isn't in the right place, drop us a card." Isn't that clever? Teller's colleagues of Florence Radiation Laboratory came up with Project Chariot as part of Project Plowshare. Their plan was to explode 6 thermonuclear bombs underground at Cape Thompson, Alaska, to dig a harbor. Then it says uncritical technophiles almost bought the plan. That's all by itself. The Firecracker Boys by Dan O'Neill reveals common threads that run through the history of proposals for questionable mega projects. For one, the promoters sold it as an economic development opportunity, jobs for people. That pitch convinced legislators, business groups, and the media. Another supporter, as with Haarp, was the University of Alaska administration. Again, the appeal was the prospect of money and jobs for the state's residents. O'Neill points out that during the planning stage of the scientists ignored the Inupiat people who lived near to the site of the proposed nuclear bomb blast. Inupiat people. Excuse me if I said that wrong. Of course, why would we think about American Indians? They only own this fucking country. Why would we think about the indigenous people? That pisses me off. Anyway. O'Neill points out that during the planning stage, the scientists ignore. The Inupiat people who lived nearest to the site of the proposed nuclear bomb blasts, 30 miles from ground zero. A review of the Firecracker Boys said, O'Neill still marvels at the determination of the Eskimos who saw through the government's empty promises and outright lies. There's a notation here. Marilee Enge, blowing the lid off of a nuclear tale. Anchorage Daily News, December 25th, 1994. In the end, they didn't blast the hole in the coast. Between the native people's stubborn opposition and 3 heroic scientists who stood up and said it was a bad idea, it didn't happen. We got to thank God for that. As if to set an example of what happens to academics who speak out with independent views. The 3 brave scientists who opposed Project Chariot lost their jobs at the university and were blackballed from academia elsewhere. One had to leave the country to find work. When O'Neill researched his book, he told a newspaper reporter later, there was still a lot of people on campus who were very sensitive about the topic, who didn't talk about it, for years, decades. Now there's a reference here. Merrily Enge, blowing the lid off of a nuclear tail. Anchorage Daily News, December 25th, 1994. So that there's two references to that same article. Milestones in the history of arrogant. Okay, there's a semi-title. Destroying a radiation belt. Milestones in the history of arrogant science also include 3 space explosions of the U.S. military's Project Argus in 1958. Each shot spewed atomic particles into Earth's magnetic field, where they were trapped and spiraled back and forth at high speeds. Remember, there's relativistic particles up there. In essence, said the New York Times, the Argus experiments produced artificial belts comparable to the natural Van Allen radiation belt, regions of high energy charged particles around the Earth at between 2,000 and 12,000 miles altitude. Thus, after each shot, a curtain of radiation that is of extremely high speed particles spread around the world. There's a reference here. Walter Sullivan, Blast May Erase Radiation Belt, in quotation, New York Times, April 30th, 1962. In the opinion of the authors, psychiatrists should be invited into think tanks where decisions are made to modify one of Earth's protective layers. I have to agree with that. Shortly after Dr. James A. Van Allen discovered the 2 radiation belts around Earth in the International Geophysical Year, IGY, of 1958. 2 physicists at the University of Minnesota proposed that a hydrogen bomb be exploded inside the radiation belt. Sure, why not, people? According to the New York Times, the 2 physicists wrote, "It might be amusing to the end, the IGY, by destroying some of the radiation field first discovered by the IGY." Next little semi-title, Copper Wiring in the Sky. The folksy saying, "What goes around, come around," applies to what experimenters inject into a lower altitude jet stream, as well as into the Van Allen belt. In the early 1960s, someone in the U.S. military apparently decided that the ionosphere had to be replaced because it was unpredictable, dynamic, lively. It danced with the ebb and flow of charged particles. They decreed that it had to be controlled. In their mindset, were telecommunications more important than the integrity of nature's Earth electric circuit. The planetary scale engineers tried to replace a 10 by 40 kilometer section of the ionosphere with telecommunication shield of 350,000 copper needles tossed into orbit. There's a reference here. Nigel Harley of Holland, vandalizing the Van Allen belts, winter 1988-89, Earth Island Journal, page 11. The U.S. military did not know what the outcome would be in the early 1960s when they planned an assault on Earth's magnetic field with copper needles, each 2 to 4 centimeters long. They planned to increase the size of the needle dump in space if the project proved successful. Apparently it was a bust. It was hushed up and kept out of mass media. Another independent researcher, Leigh Richmond Donahue. Now I got a reference here. Private communications with Leigh Richard Donahue of the Centric Foundation, Maggie Valley, North Carolina. tracked events during the post-war years and through 1977 alongside with a physicist genius, her late husband, Walter Richmond. She writes, when the military sent up a band of tiny copper wires in the ionosphere to orbit the planet so as to reflect radio waves and make reception clearer, we had the 8.5 Alaska earthquake, and Chile lost a good deal of its coast. That band of copper wires interfered with a planetary magnetic field. I'm almost done, people, so it's almost over. Any ecological insensitivity of engineers in the U.S. has been more than matched by their peers in other countries. Often the scientists in North America just had bigger allowances to spend and therefore they could cause more damage. The former Soviet Union was reportedly getting ready to change the climate before the 1970s. That country's director of hydrometeorological work described proposals to make Russia a more comfortable place to live, at least until the ecological backlash that could have hit afterwards. Proposals included removal of the Arctic ice pack, damming of the Bering Strait, and rerouting Siberia rivers. There's a reference here. Lowell Ponty, The Cooling, Prentice Hall Incorporated, New Jersey, 1976. If ordinary common sense were invited into military think tanks to vote on such proposal, what would they say to the big boys with the big toys? And that's the end of chapter 5, people. I found it very interesting and enlightening. I hope you did too. So, thank you for being here. If you watched and you listened, thank you. Thank you, everybody who's out there. And I just want to say, I realize now that big battle I had, you people with the L, you better all be nice to me because I didn't wipe down my walls and the cameras. So you all were seeing me through CCTV cameras. I'm going to get paid for that. And some of you should just send me money. Otherwise, it's not going to be pleasant for you. Anyway, thank you for being here. Have a good night now. Remember, I think some of you are amazing. And some of you I love. Oh, well, we got to spread the love, right? I love you all. Bye now.